Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are, I hope that you're having a wonderful day. I'm your lovely host, That Lit Astro Chick, the channel where we look at the natal charts and the astrological events for authors, writers, artists, and anybody that I find interesting. This week has been a very difficult week for me because I had to deal with another family death. Sadly, this Saturn right now is really taking me out. And in addition to that, I also have a really bad cold. So I'm hoping that I can get through this without hacking and wheezing. But if I do get to that point, I'll just start to wrap up. Since I've been secluded and not really able to do much because I've been doped up from this cold medication, I did want to come through and do a very quick natal chart reading in order to keep up with the momentum of this channel because I really do just find that this is a passion project and it's kind of fun. And even though currently I've been going through a very difficult year, I did want to at least keep this up. So I wanted to cover the natal charts of authors whose birthdays have just passed or have just been around. And last month was Haruki Murakami's birthday. I found out about Haruki Murakami when I was in college, and it was during the metafiction class. And I had been assigned to read his book, Norwegian Wood. And at first, I was like, absolutely will not read this book. And it was because the book was it was more than 500 pages, I want to say. And I tend to have a preference for books where I like for them to be kind of in between like situationships to starter marriages. So no more than 150 to 500 pages for me. However, I was very fascinated by the book, Norwegian Wood, because it was written in a way that I had not read before. And I also like that it was just a classic tale that was considered to be somewhat Greek because I believe that it was based on Oedipus. If I'm remembering the exact plot of it, which I'm not going to do here. But I have also read more of his books, and I just thought that it would be fun to do a natal chart on Haruki Murakami. So without further ado, let's get into it. Haruki Murakami was born January 12th, 1949 in Kyoto, Japan. So the first thing that I notice about his chart is the fact that he is a Capricorn sun conjunct to his Jupiter in Capricorn. Jupiter is the planet, sorry, not Jupiter. Saturn is the planet that's ruled by Capricorn, so it refers to all 10th house matters when it comes to delays, contractions, restrictions, discipline that we might need to have. Saturn is represented as being the father of the zodiac, and that's how Capricorns are represented as being the fathers of the zodiac. This would make him somebody who would be very business minded, who would be very much invested in making money, as well as in his social standing. And I'm going to jump around a little bit while I talk about this because this is the second time I've done this video because my computer ate up the last recording that I had. I really do need to get more recording software, sidebar. But with his sun conjunct his Jupiter in Capricorn, this would make him someone who would be very quiet and who would be very hardworking. And it's interesting because his sun and his Jupiter conjunct, these also trine with his north node, which is in Taurus. And when I do natal charts, because I'm starting to do them now for family and friends before I really start to expand my services out, one of the things that I like to look at in somebody's chart is to see if there's a T-square that's happening in terms of their nodes. So for the story of the nodes, the south node refers to where we have been. The north node refers to where we will go. And with Murakami having his north node in Taurus, this means that Scorpio is on his south node. And in addition to Scorpio being on his south node, the asteroids Vesta and Aphrodite are also conjunct in Scorpio. Vesta is an asteroid that refers to the ways in which we may provide support as well as the ways in which we may need to withdraw from something. And Aphrodite is the asteroid that refers to our sexual expressions. So in a previous lifetime, Murakami may have been someone who was very much invested in expressing himself in terms of what his physical needs and his physical desires were. He was most likely somebody that had a very strong appetite in terms of overpowering other people and potentially developing parasitic relationships, because Scorpio at its lower forms does deal with parasitic entities. It's a very dynamic sign. It's a sign that is very much centered around transformation, but there is also a lot of pain and trauma that's associated with it. So, in a previous lifetime, Murakami was most likely somebody who was overly invested, perhaps, in taking from others through his physical desires. And then in this lifetime, what he's supposed to learn how to do is to become more sufficient in terms of acquiring materials, wealth, as well as being someone who is going to be invested into his reputation and his public standing. Essentially, Scorpio South nodes and Taurus North nodes are people where they have to go from being part of the underworld to being a square in this particular lifetime. And when I look at what is squaring his nose in terms of the signs, we have Pluto, because he has his Pluto in Leo. For a lot of the people that are online, the people that are my age, so the millennials, the Gen Zs, the alphas, we're all mad at the Pluto and Leo generation because they just don't understand what it is that we're going through. Pluto and Leo was essentially the boomers. These were the people where what they got from the world was when it was at its height, because the boomers generation was the generation that was oftentimes known for having the most in terms of material wealth and success. This is where you get the idea of the families that have the homes and the 2.2 kids and the dogs. I really don't believe that many people had access to that, but this was definitely signified by the Pluto and Leo generation. And Pluto is exalted when it's in Leo because it refers to the rise of status, the rise of creativity, the rise of celebrity, because Leo is definitely the sign of celebrity. And because we do have his Pluto squaring his nodes, this means that Murakami most likely went through a transformation in terms of the way that he related to himself when it came to being from one end of the spectrum to another. And in addition to that, his asteroid series, which refers to the ways in which we show support to people, is conjunct to his Pluto. So him being part of the Pluto Leo generation was part of what catapulted him into his success, and is what I believe most likely related to that Taurus North Node destiny that he had to fulfill in this particular time. Now, do I think that he is somebody to where he is this completely stand-up guy who's never done anything wrong and he's just a do-gooder? No. And I say that because I've read like quite a few of his books, and I really do enjoy just how unusual they are, as well as how particular the scenes are and how detailed they are. He has a way of dropping you within this little world that he's created, but not in a way that I think would be incredibly visceral or emotionally related. It tends to be more centered around those details, and I think that this is something that he's very good at because he does have his Saturn in Virgo at the 5th degree. And in addition to that, it tries with his Jupiter and his, it tries with his Jupiter in Capricorn. So Saturn in Virgo would refer to someone who is very perfectionistic. He applied himself in the real world. And I say that especially because he does have his Saturn squaring his Chiron in Sagittarius. But I think that Saturn in Virgo is one of the reasons as to why he is so detailed in terms of the scenes that he describes for his readers, and because of those details, those are what elicit a lot of the reactions that I tend to have to them. In fact, I remember one of the first conversations that I had with a classmate in grad school was when we were talking about what it takes in order to make a Murakami book. And one of the things that we talked about was we need a Beatles song, a MILF, a very unusual intimate scene, random crime, fish fish falling out of the sky, and cats. Okay, we can throw some spaghetti in there, and an old wives' tale. Then you got Murakami, and then I see Murakami as being kind of unusual because his books have been translated into more than 42 languages, and he is also a national bestseller. And most authors in Japan are not read as widely as Murakami is. He does have a lot of that Western appeal. And I do realize I'm kind of jumping around a little bit with the natal chart. So let me go back to what I was talking about with the sun and then move on to the Mercury. Now, his asteroid Psyche, which I refer to as being the who stole your bike asteroid. It's like Chiron, except it refers to wounds that we will never feel like we get over, is conjunct to his sun as well as his Jupiter in Capricorn. And this can refer to issues that he may have in terms of his social standing, as well as to his material possessions. He may not feel as though he is ever going to have enough to where it will satisfy him because there's always that emptiness and that fear around perhaps losing his reputation. And this is also very strongly associated with his ego because the sun also deals with the father as well as it deals with children as well as friends. Speaking of friends, his Mercury is conjunct his Mars in Aquarius. Mercury in Aquarius, depending on the text that you read, it can be seen as being exalted because it represents an unusual way in which we can communicate our ideas to other people. I believe that Gloria Naylor also has this aspect in her chart. Her sun is conjunct her Mercury in Aquarius, and so does Virginia Woolf, who I think might be the next person that I do for this series. But it refers to people that have a very good way of communicating ideas that are going to be fresh and new and exciting for the people that they are speaking with, or for Murakami's case, the people that are reading his work. Now, I did think that it was interesting that his Mercury was conjunct to his Mars in Aquarius. And the reason I say that is because Mars in Aquarius will refer to what we put our energy towards, because Mars discusses our willpower, how we resolve conflicts, as well as what we like in terms of bedroom proclivities. And I'm thinking now about a line from his memoir, What We Talk About When We Talk About Running, something like that. And it was a throwaway line where he had talked about how sleeping with friends is always a bad idea. And he does have these moments in his books where he throws these little digs in there. And at first you're like, well, is that true? Did that actually happen? No, I think that happened. I think that he has probably slept with his friends. I think he has slept with a lot of his friends. And in addition to that, even though I do believe that he got married very early on, I don't think that he ever stopped. And I say that because he does have his Venus in Sagittarius and at that 28th degree. So the 28th degree can refer to places in where we either are really big leaders or we might end up being a grade 8 follower. I believe that he is somebody who is very much invested in his love life. And Venus in Sagittarius is going to refer to someone who has a taste that is going to be very expansive and very optimistic due to that Jupiter influence. He most likely is somebody to where he has had a lot of different love affairs and a lot of different partners. And I say that because he does have his Eros conjunct to his Venus and his Chiron in Sagittarius. So I would take this to mean that he's probably had a wide appetite, a lot of affairs that he has had, even though he's been very quiet about his personal life. For example, when he was writing initially it was called IQ 84, and then like an idiot I found out that it was a typo and it should have been 1984. He refused to discuss what the book was about to anybody, and I would say that that is further demonstrated by having his sun conjunct Jupiter in Capricorn. Jupiter in Capricorn is very cold, and Capricorn is already very cold. Is that it's a book that's about an affair. And even though he's never just came out and said that he has ever had an affair on his wife, I think that he has, especially because you do have that Venus conjunct to that Eros in Sagittarius. As well as having Chiron in Sag, this could mean that he could have had some challenges in terms of what his belief systems are. He might have been somebody who maybe wanted to go outside of what was considered to be the cultural norm for him at that time or within his community. And he also may have been somebody who would have been really centered around um, expressing curiosity or flexibility or versatility in terms of his mind, his ideals, because he does have his Uranus in Gemini. And I'd also say because he has that Venus in opposition to Uranus in Gemini, that probably does represent a lot of love affairs that he has had that have probably fallen out, specifically because he might have outgrown them or they might have outgrown him, or it could have represented something that could have been very sudden between him and his previous partners and his friends, because he does have that Mercury conjunct Mars in Aquarius. And Aquarius will usually deal with energy that is very sudden. He also could be somebody to where maybe he had a change of heart that was going to be very mercurial, because he does have that Saturn squaring his Uranus in Gemini. Either way, that's going to be a lot of people that he has been with in the past, and we're also not going to know anything about this. And I say that because he does have his Sun as well as his Jupiter in Capricorn squaring his Neptune in Libra. So Neptune in Libra, it's usually going to refer to fantasies that we may have about marriages, one on one contracts. I apologize if you hear my cat scratching at the door. He's okay. Um, as well as potentially having some type of scandal that's related to the opposite sex, because Libra does deal with women, as well as it being at that 15th degree. That could represent some form of manipulation or lying that might be going on his part. Basically, don't trust anything that he says about his marriage. Thankfully, he says nothing. That's probably the wisest choice, because I think that there were a lot of people that he was probably with that we don't know about. And I'm gonna have to wrap this up and actually get my cat, because he is being incredibly noisy. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of this North Node status that he has is that his vertex, and that's the asteroid that refers to expectations that we have to meet, is also in Taurus, and that is conjunct with his North Node. So in this lifetime, he was expected to be somebody who was going to be a stand up person, someone who was going to be more concerned about his reputation and his social standing in this particular incarnation of his lifetime as opposed to his last one. And I think that this is something that he's been able to achieve, because he does have he's one of the few Japanese novelists that has achieved a mainstream status in this particular lifetime. And I do see him as being someone who is very successful. Do I think that he is exactly who we see him as being the public, as being very respectable, being very respectful, being a very creative person, as well as being someone who is a late bloomer? And I know that this is because Murakami wrote his first novel, I Want to Believe, at 28. And in a world where if you're not coming out the womb and being talented and successful, you're eaten up alive, that would be considered a late bloomer aspect. And he's also somebody who has been very much invested in terms of endurance and long-term strategy, because he is also somebody who has been a marathon runner for a very, very long time, per his memoir, Things We Talk About When We Talk About Running. I do think that he is somebody who this time was more concerned about his status and was very lucky in terms of the work that he has put through, because he is a very hardworking person. I don't quite see him as being the type to party, but I don't think he needs to be. And I really do enjoy his work. And I hope that you have enjoyed listening to me ramble on about his natal chart this time. And I hope that my recorder does not cut out and erase this one. So, to conclude, this has been the natal chart for Haruki Murakami. This is that lit astro chick. Thank you very